Hi everyone, I'm Gretchen and this is Joanne, and we have Brett Packer from corporate, and we are actually on the way in Japan, Okinawa, on the way to the R&D lab, but because it's quite a far journey, we have invited Brett to talk about or share some stories with us about Gary.
Yeah, so last time we were together, Gretchen, I was telling a story I call the flood that happened in Ecuador.
Yeah.
And so I want to move into the next chapter.
Okay.
And so, you know, the flood, I started working with Gary 18 years ago at the Finca Botanica and was there for a really exciting time when he was first developing the farm. And then from there, I actually went to his first farm in St. Mary's, Idaho, where really I call it the cradle or the birthplace of seed to sill. And, you know, Gary developed seed to sill there. And then from that remote location, it spread to the world, right? And so I was just there last week for the Gold Retreat. And, you know, lots of memories come back every time I go there. It was one of Gary's favorite places. And so I went from Ecuador, and Gary invited me to come to the winter harvest and help him. And I mean, you know, that in Idaho in the winter, it's quite snowy, it's quite cold. And that's when he would distill grand fir and blue spruce. And so, you know, generally harvests don't happen in winter, right? And it was such a special event because Gary would bring people from all over the world. And it was, when I first went there, the Highland Flats farm wasn't developed yet. And in a nice summer day, it takes about 2 hours from the St. Mary's distillery to the Highland Flats tree farm. And so in the winter, Gary and his best friend Eldon Niddle, they would chip the trees in Highland Flats, and then they would drive them all the way down to the St. Mary's farm. And so if you've driven to the farm, you know how curvy the road is, how treacherous. And then when you turn up the Benoit Road, it's a really rugged dirt road. And so, you know, Gary, that's when he really started training me in the distillery. So I would be in a nice warm distillery with a roof over my head. And Gary, no matter what, around the clock would drive the semis from Highland Flats to St. Mary's. And I mean, sometimes the roads were so treacherous, the drive would take him 6 hours.
Wow.
And, you know, Gary loved semis, he loved driving trucks, and he also, you know, he really developed a lot of skills in Alaska and the Alaskan Highway in Canada. And so he was truly an expert on driving those kinds of roads.
I guess you have to fill in with the readers or viewers who doesn't really know Gary that well. How did he get trained from Alaska?
Yeah, well, I mean, so Gary grew up in a really rugged forested region in central Idaho. And so he grew up ranching and logging. So that was just, you know, that was the life he knew. But then he moved to Canada and started homesteading. And so he was developing land there, and eventually he started work in Alaska. And he would also drive, if you've been to the Fort Nelson farm, the Alaskan Highway goes right by the farm. And it goes all the way from the northern U.S. all the way to Alaska through Canada. And so, yeah, a lot of his early years were spent driving those roads. You know, there's parts of Mary's books that cover that. And so he took all those skills and used it to move the wood chips. Because if you know the grand fir or how we do it, the trees have to be fully chipped so we can load them in an extraction chamber and have all the surface area exposed to steam so we can do our extraction. And so one of my favorite things, though, they would call on the CB and we would drive to the Benoit Road, and the road is so steep and icy going to the distillery that they have to put chains on the semi-wheels. And so we would go down and help them. And you know, the type of man Gary was, unless you knew how to put semi chains on properly, you weren't quite right in his book. That was something Gary really, really valued, or being able to sharpen a chainsaw or things like that. And so, you know, Gary never had an accident or went off the road, but his friend Eldon was from Texas where they don't have snow. And so there were times that no major accidents, but Eldon actually slipped off the road, and I would have to drive a piece of heavy equipment down, hook up to the semi, and pull Eldon out.
Wow.
Sometimes these little adventures would take all the way till 4 a.m. And
Wow.
so, and we, back then, we had 2 shifts, and we ran the distillery 24 hours a day. But it was really fun because when Gary would pull into the distillery, he loved, in the semi, you pull the horn like this.
Oh.
So every time he'd pull in the yard, he would pull the horn.
We go,
yeah.
like that, right?
Yeah. And for the brand partners there, it was really fun because we knew Gary had shown up. And then it was, one of my favorite things is when we'd unload the trailers of the wood chips into the extraction chambers, the smell of the Grand Fir that would fill the entire distillery, it's just unforgettable. There's nothing in the world like it. And then, shortly after, we'd start actually collecting essential oil once it condensed. And so, I remember though, because I used to lead for the summers, and I would do whitewater rafting. And I came back one year and met Gary at Highland Flats, and he said, "Brett, I'm building a distillery here." And I was like, "Really?" And he flagged it all out and then immediately started construction. And so, he was on site, he oversaw all the construction. And, anytime Gary started a project, his focus that he had to see it through, I mean, it was really something to be part of. And so, the project was challenging, but Gary had a lot of really exciting new design elements he wanted to add that he'd always wanted for distilling Grand Fir. And so, a memory that I could just never forget, because all those years of him driving all the way from Highland Flats to the St. Mary's farm, all the challenges. I remember when the Highland Flats farm first became operational, and we went to do our first distillation, and he drove the semi literally from on the farm to the distillery. So instead of a 6-hour drive, let's say it was a very, very short drive. And I remember, Gary could get very passionate, which would lead to him being very emotional. And I was in the distillery waiting like I always was, and he drove the truck in, and he just teared up and started crying because
Leaky eye syndrome.
the leaky eye syndrome. And I mean, this was just a moment between him and I. And he was like, Brett, he's like, I love that drive down to St. Mary's, but this just, to achieve this and have the distillery in the Highland Flats farm,
Yeah.
it was just very emotional for him and for me too.
For sure, yes.
And now we have, in my opinion, one of the most advanced distilleries in the entire world. And that was Gary's dream of creating the Highland Flats distillery.
Yeah. And how long has the St. Mary's distillery been distilling the Grand Fir from Highland Flats?
The exact date I wasn't there for.
Like around how many years?
So it was in the very late 90s, and then he would do the winter harvest, and it would last a month. And then, the Highland Flats distillery, I remember it really well. It basically went operational on New Year's Eve in 2012.
Oh.
And then went full operational 2013.
Right. So it will be like probably 10 years, right? Around 10 years?
Yeah.
Or like, 8 to 10, 8 years maybe?
Well, for the Highland Flats distillery?
For the St. Mary's.
He was
driving
Yeah, he was driving it back and forth, right?
Yeah, just over 10 years. Yeah.
And I remember without, with good weather, the road is, and with normal cars, the ride is around 2 to 3 hours only, right? But with the semi and with all the loadings, it took actually 6 hours.
Yeah, especially
right?
because
and with the snow and
snow
stuff,
and the
right?
ice. Yeah.
So it's really tiring, and it's really very, very difficult and dangerous to drive all the way from St. Mary's to Highland Flats and probably back with an empty truck, right?
Yeah, he would have to return after he unloaded with an empty
Yeah.
truck. Yep.
And sometimes it's in dark nights.
Yeah, I mean, he drove at night all the time.
Mhm.
Most of the time it's in the dark.
Yeah.
Because they would be cutting and chipping during the daytime.
Yeah.
And then fill the truck. And then once the truck is filled, they would drive down. So,
Yeah.
so for the people who don't know, who's never been there, Highland Flats is actually a little bit higher up in elevation. So he's actually driving downhill to St. Marie. So being in the snow, in the ice, going downhill in the dark with an 18-wheeler filled with wooden chips, it's not an easy feat, I would say, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, Gary really couldn't find any other truck drivers that were willing to do that drive. Just him and Eldon.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. And I heard they're doing something new in Highland Flats. Do you mind updating us?
Yeah, well, it's exciting if you know the Booty Boost and the Muscle Rub with our hemp products, seed distill hemp products. And so we're doing a hemp harvest.
And what time of the year is usually the hemp harvest?
It's the last week of September.
Now I really want to go.
Yeah, and we started doing it last year, and we're going to do it every year now. We also do one in Nebo because the hemp for our products is grown at Mount Nebo in the Highland Flats farm.
And then how do you harvest the hemp? It's like a plant, it's like a leaf, right? Is it like a leafy plant?
Yeah, I mean, so it has what's called fan leaves on it, but then it's unique that there's a flower, if you're familiar with hemp, and so it has a bunch of different anatomy parts that are pretty interesting to study. Part of it's called a calyx, and basically flowers have calyxes, but it turns into a seed pod. That's where the seed's stored. And then it has trichomes, which are really interesting. They're like these crystalline structures. And then, so it's leaves and then all the things that create the hemp flower.
Right. So if anyone is interested in hemp harvest, block your schedule every year, last week of September.
Where can they find the information?
You can find it on our tour site, the Young Living Farm tour site, and that's also where we're doing the registration. And you can find all farm events on the tour site.
Yeah. So, and I heard that you guys are building a new structure at the farm.
Yeah, so if you've been to Highland Flats, you know, Gary built his logging camp there. They call it Taj Mahal as a joke. But if you've seen the show MASH with those Green Army tents, those have been there since 2009, 2010. And we're finally building the lodge that Gary had always dreamt of being at that location.
Wow, so amazing. Okay, I'm already planning in my head for the next harvest.
So the logging, the lodge will be ready by this winter harvest? The coming one in January?
Yes.
In 2027?
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's almost done, right? I heard.
Yeah, I was there just a couple days ago before I flew out here. And it should be done in the next couple months.
Yeah. Wow. Can't wait.
That's
So
exciting.
for information, we have Toshi as our driver as well, our GM from Japan. If anyone is interested in visiting Okinawa, the farm in Japan, feel free to contact Toshi.
And how do people contact him?
Well, email or Facebook.
Looking forward to seeing you guys in Okinawa.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And we have Chris, sorry. Okay.